Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Paul, we've got a tough act to follow, two prime ministers. But thank God I've got you on stage. Just a brief introduction to Paul. He is a Nobel laureate, won the prize for economics in 2018. He was also the chief economist at the World Bank. And he's taught at least one prime minister. Rishi Sunak in Stanford, was it?
Yep.
Was he a good student?
I can't, professional obligations mean that I can't say.
So Stanford, so let's start with that. So you were, in your own words, once a cheerleader for Silicon Valley.
Yep.
It synced well with the theses that won you the Nobel Prize, that it was the power of ideas that could transform the world. I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible. But you told me now that you're disappointed with the way technology hasn't really worked to transform the world in the way you thought it would. Yeah. What went wrong?
Well, let me try and go back and situate myself in 1982 when I became a professor, when I got my first job in economics. This was a time of great pessimism. If any of you are as old as I am, you'll remember a report called Limits to Growth, which said that the global economy was doomed because we were going to run out of petroleum supplies in the 1990s. Now, I came on the scene and said, this is just absurd. If you look at history, we've had innovation on top of innovation on top of innovation, and the actual opportunities for us are very positive. And if you think about what's the real problem we face now, the people who were worried about not enough petroleum got the sign wrong. It's not that we have too little petroleum or fossil fuel, it's we have way too much of it. And if we burn it all, we'll cook the planet. And the way we would discover all of that new supply would be because people would innovate, they'd find ways to solve problems, they'd discover much more fossil fuel as they had. So when I saw Silicon Valley starting to seize the opportunities with digital electronics, I said, the sky is the limit here. We'll have all kinds of things we can do in the future that we couldn't do before. And that optimism about what we can do with the technology is still correct. I still believe that. And I believe it about a problem like climate change. We can decarbonize our electricity supply. We can find ways to still have growth, still have improving standards of living, and protect the planet. We'll discover ways to do that. But what's the disappointment? The question is, if we're given opportunities, what do we decide to do with those? And with the opportunities that we were given in the United States with digital technology, we have wasted, squandered a really phenomenal opportunity. And the way to see what we've lost is to compare the success in India with the way technology has been used in the United States. I think the initiative...
Let me just interrupt you here. Yeah. But if you ask the companies in Silicon Valley, they'll say, where is the lost opportunity? We've become the 4 or 5 most powerful companies in the world. The companies who have for the last 15 years dominated the US stock markets, never happened before. And so no signs of slowing.
Okay, well, let me give you the conversation I have back and forth with them. When I said before that, look, historically, one of the signs of the dramatic improvements in standards of living is a steadily increasing life expectancy across countries, across time. And so then I talk to the Silicon Valley types and say, life expectancy has stopped increasing in the United States. It's actually falling. And then they say, oh, well, no, we don't want to use that measure anymore for progress. We want to use something else. And I'm saying, no, if that's the measure that we picked in the beginning, you've got to stick with it. And by that measure, something's really gone wrong in the United States. People are not living as long as they did before. So how can it be that we've had a technological revolution and people aren't living as long? It's because that technology has not been used to improve the quality of life. And then you see what Aadhaar has done by not just making it easy for people in this room to make digital payments, but taking hundreds of millions of people who had no existence in the formal state. They had no document, no birth certificate, no driver's license, no official document of any kind. They didn't exist in the eyes of the modern state. Aadhaar made them real, gave them existence by giving them a number. And then all kinds of things have been built on top of that. So there's the direct benefit transfer schemes, access to financial accounts. But this was because this country decided we are going to use the technological opportunities here to benefit everyone. And I guarantee you life expectancy hasn't started falling in India.
It happened here because it came in from the top. You had Prime Minister Modi, when he came in 2014, adopt Aadhaar, which had been around even before he came, but he chose that, I mean, he stuck with it and used it for what, and we've seen the, what's happened now. So are you saying that government should be playing a larger role?
Yeah, absolutely.
Than just policy making and technology?
I'm saying that, and I think economists have done a huge disservice to the world by just repeating mindless assertions about the government is the problem and the market is the solution. That's just not true. So let's talk about something practical. How am I here? I got here because I could go to the airport, get on an airplane, fly here at minimal disruption and very safely. Why is it possible that I can do that? Well, there are all of these technologies of the jet engine, the GPS navigation system, the aeronautical insights about how to design the wings of an airplane. But that system wouldn't work if we didn't have a Federal Aviation Administration in the United States and in comparable agencies around the world who regulate the air travel industry and make it safe. So you don't need a government which is big in the sense of running the airlines. That is not a good idea. But you do need a government which is big in the sense, or strong, I'm sorry, strong. We want a strong government that can say, you're going to lose your ability to fly airplanes if you don't follow the safety regulations. Or you're going to lose your ability to sell that airplane unless you fix the safety defect. You need a government strong enough to say that to generate the benefits that we get from air travel. And that's what's missing in the use of technology in the United States. But that was what was present here in India. People around the government, and even people from the private sector, like Nandan Nilekani, came in and said, we're going to build a system that benefits everyone. And we're going to follow certain principles. And it was really a kind of a masterpiece of design in the sense of, just like the GPS system, Aadhaar solved only one problem. Present a person to me, and I'll tell you what that person's number is. That's all it did. Just like GPS, all it does is tell you what are your coordinates on the surface of the Earth. But with that foundation, you can then build all of these fantastic services that you now enjoy. So the government in India was not afraid to set up the Aadhaar system. Was not afraid to indicate how it would be used in something like UPI and direct benefits. And the government of India was happy to build apps. In my country, people are like terrified of letting the government do something like build an app, but it's a shame.
Yeah, so we got Aadhaar, we got DigiYatra, but companies would argue that, so you're talking about technology needing more regulation.
Yep.
But you could argue that rules hold back technology. And if you have too much regulation, you won't see technology develop the way it can or has.
Sure. So you can have too much of anything. We had a form of regulation for prices on airline seats at one time in the United States. Economists pointed out that was unnecessary, so we got rid of price regulation. You can let the market determine the price for an airline seat. But what we didn't do was deregulate the safety standards in manufacturing airplanes or the safety regulations in actually running an airline. Until, to be honest, until the Trump administration. where we actually did say to Boeing, basically, it's fine, we won't regulate safety anymore, and Boeing started creating airplanes that crashed and killed people. And this turned out to be bad for the shareholders of Boeing, it's bad for the workers of Boeing, it's bad for the citizens of the world. So that was a case where this kind of mindset of, oh, deregulation is bad, let's get more growth by turning off deregulation, was really harmful to everybody.
So let's come back to how India has, the success of Aadhaar and Digi-Yatra in India. So now how can India drive that advantage further in developing or leveraging that to take a lead in emerging technologies? Difficult for us, companies sitting in the room, to take on the Googles and the Facebooks and the large tech companies in the US. But how do we leverage our strength to build our own market?
Well, I think the fundamental difference was that in the United States, people saw the opportunity to create a platform and then to use the monopoly power that was conveyed by a platform to capture private wealth. What people in India saw is that they could build a platform of Aadhaar that was controlled by the government and could be used for the benefit of the people, not to generate wealth for just a small subset of people. So the platforms have been very powerful, but we need to think, what are we doing with them and what do we want to achieve?
So do you then view India as an emerging technological, I won't use the word superpower, but can it become one?
Well, I think, frankly, we're in a very bad situation in the United States because the mantra of the Republican Party is government can't do anything right, put us in charge and we'll prove it. And so we've had governments that don't do things. We've had governments that stop doing things like regulating Boeing. And that's led to this perception that the government can't accomplish anything. We've had other trends as well. The judiciary increasingly tries to micromanage everything the government does. And so people feel like the government can't get anything done. That makes them want to basically tear it all down, to get rid of the government. When in fact, what they need to do is build a government which is strong enough to get something done. The benefit in India that you enjoy right now is that people can see in their daily lives the benefits that they have been able to enjoy because of government innovation in terms of how benefits are handed out, how people get access to financial accounts, how they do transactions. People see that the government has delivered. That gives the government a level of legitimacy, which it can then use to try and go do more. And I want to emphasize that this really depends on an executive branch of government that can make things happen. If you read the history of Aadhaar, you remember there were like Supreme Court cases and justices and people saying, oh, all kinds of terrible things will happen because of Aadhaar and they will never succeed. But you had an executive branch which pushed this idea forward and didn't let the judges hamstring them, and they achieved this remarkable success. So in the West, we're too hamstrung by the judiciary. We have this longing for an executive that could get something done, but unfortunately, the people who are promoting themselves as the ones who can get something done probably can't.
Okay. So here the executive was willing to push technology, and it happened, and we've seen the result.
And not just push it, but push it in a direction that would benefit everyone.
But so technology and urbanization, those are your two pet themes, and you've said that urbanization is the fundamental engine of economic growth. It's something is very, very close to you, and that's something when Prime Minister Modi took over in 2014, he spoke about 100 smart cities. So clearly, you were in sync on that. You came and met him in Gujarat when you were Gujarat Chief Minister to talk about urbanization.
No, I came.
It hasn't taken off the way we would have liked.
So, to be honest, I predicted privately that when Prime Minister Modi moved to the national government, he would be disappointed by his inability to continue the kind of successes he had achieved in Gujarat. In the national government, you're too far away from the facts on the ground. What's impressive to me is the other achievements that he has been able to push forward, like in the digital space. But the big question for India right now is how do you get the momentum back on urbanization?
How do we do that?
And successful urbanization was a very important key to the success in China. India needs to take advantage of the potential there. The challenge with urbanization is land assembly. If you can assemble a large enough parcel of land, you can take that land, which is worth very little, and turn it into land which is phenomenally valuable by creating a modern city there. So by land, I mean something like 1,000 square kilometers, say 30 by 30 kilometers. Not huge by the standards of a nation the size of India, but in a country with a whole history of private ownership rights of land, it's extremely difficult to assemble a parcel of that size and say, okay, we're going to build a city here. I think India needs to get clever about figuring out how to do that.
Before we get to the problem, though, can you just explain to us why you think, or why do you call urbanization as the prime engine of growth, of development?
Yeah. First, if you just measure the location where GDP gets produced all over the world, it's very much concentrated in urban centers. There are a few things like land, like agriculture and minerals that require the land, resources of land, but all of the other value is produced in cities. So absent impediments, all of that activity will move into cities. And this is a reflection of the thing I first studied, which is the power of ideas. When you can share ideas and work with the ideas of others in a connected urban environment, you can produce much more value than if you're off on your own. So the future will be almost entirely urban. 90+% of the population will be in urban centers, but you need to expand the total amount of floor space in urban areas to accommodate all those people. And every country in the world right now is having trouble increasing the supply of urban floor space.
So how do you increase that? I mean, will the market ultimately solve that, or would you need regulation? Do you need policy?
What we've seen is that the market cannot increase the supply, and so what's happened is as the demand for urban floor space goes up, the price goes up, but the supply doesn't respond. And the reason the supply doesn't respond is because there are many levels of government now which stand in the way of someone who wants to build a new building, increase the height of the building on a particular plot of land, convert some land from agricultural into buildings. So it's the government, frankly, which is in the way of the increase in the supply of urban floor space that everybody in the world needs.
But here the government headed by a person who's convinced that urbanization is the way to go. And yet he finds it difficult to push it.
Yep. Well,
it just tells you how difficult the... So what would you advise him to do?
Yeah, the dilemma here is that the big gains come from letting millions of people cooperate with each other to produce value in a city. But getting millions of people organized to go in a particular direction is very challenging. The thing that I think India should be doing is first trying to make it possible to increase the breadth of urban development in existing cities, increase the height of the buildings in the existing built area, but those two measures enough will not keep up with the demand. So you need to be thinking about entirely new cities that you could build. Now, the economics of this is really interesting. You take 1,000 square kilometers, like let's say the land of Singapore, that was worth essentially nothing when Malaysia gave it away. Lee Kuan Yew built a successful city in Singapore that meant that land was then worth $1 trillion US after a few decades.
Just the land?
Just the land, yeah. So there's buildings you had to build and there's people doing work, but just the land goes from being worth nothing to $1 trillion. With $1 trillion of gain, you can finance a lot of investments to make the city succeed. And Singapore became the first non-oil sovereign wealth fund holder of the first non-oil sovereign wealth fund because it took the gains from the land that the government owned and invested them on behalf of the citizens. So what India needs to do is to figure out how to mobilize the people who own all the pieces of land right now that can't agree on anything, assemble a parcel that's on the scale of, say, 1,000 square kilometers, which could host about 10 million people in a new city, and then offer them, you'll each get a proportional share of the $1 trillion in gain that we can build from just letting a city emerge here. But you all have to stop retaining a veto right over exactly what happens in your parcel. We have to be able to lay out, streets, and we got to put in sewers and provide for the public space. It's a very straightforward process once you assemble the land. Now, I don't think when Lee Kuan Yew took over Singapore, he used eminent domain to just take the land of the whole island. The prime minister can't do that, but what he could do is run a contest between the various states of India and say, we, the federal government, will reward the first state that finds a way to get a consensus and assemble a parcel of 1,000 square kilometers and devote it to new urban development. If you started that as a contest, instead of having states resisting an initiative like this, you'd get them running to be the ones that win and become the new Hong Kong, the new Singapore, the new Shenzhen in some part of India. So the economics of this are not hard, but the politics are challenging, and this is where leadership could really make a difference.
Moving on, you're credited with the quote that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, a terrible,
Right.
horrible thing to waste.
Right.
What, to your mind, is the biggest crisis facing us today? And what's the opportunity?
Yeah.
Is it climate change? Is it?
So climate change, to be sure. We could use climate change once again to commit to this notion that if we just create incentives for people to solve a problem, we can solve it, and we can solve it really at no great cost in terms of the quality of life. We need to have a mechanism if we want to, for example, get people to innovate in a way which decarbonizes the energy supply. You got to create a way to steer innovation in that direction instead of the direction it's been going, which is discovering more and more fossil fuel. We don't need any more of that, but we do need more innovations that are low carbon. We could commit to innovation will solve this problem. Let's just create the incentives for innovation and go forward with it. And we could get out of this doomsday kind of scenario thinking that where things are hopeless and that there's nothing we can do. It's all in our hands. We can solve that problem. So the opportunity there that we shouldn't waste is to say, we can fix this if we just set our minds to it. Now, let me say one other crisis that I think is really kind of looming where India, I think, could be particularly important. China and Russia both want to go back to a world of empires where the sovereign state, if you were listening to David Cameron, he was speaking as if it was obvious that everybody agreed that there's a notion of independent states with sovereign borders. That's not the way that people who want to go back to empire think of things. They think of empires as having the ability to meddle and influence their whole sphere of influence, and the national border is not important. So there's a vision of return to empire, which was a very durable form of human organization for centuries, that both China and Russia are pushing. And there's a Western notion of what they call the Westphalian state from the Treaty of Westphalia, which says, no, there are states with borders, and it's absolutely taboo for one state to try and invade and interfere with another. India needs to decide, does it want to be on the side of empire, or does it want to be on the side of the Westphalian state? And I think India might be able to stand up and say, we remember what it was like being part of an empire, and we didn't like it. So we want to stand up for the importance of the sovereign state as the organizing principle going forward in the world. If India takes that stand, it could really decisively tip the balance, which might otherwise go in the direction of, okay, well, China will have its imperial sphere and Russia will have its, and they'll just meddle and influence in surrounding countries, and we'll just go back to that kind of world.
You really think so?
I do.
Yeah. So one final question.
Frankly, I mean, the United States had been a strong supporter of the Westphalian states, but the United States may not be as decisive in decades to come. So the world needs
You have been fairly pessimistic about the position of the United States.
Yeah.
What's led to that? And
well, as I told you, I just look at the facts, and the facts are that we're trying to decide right now whether the most powerful nation on earth should be led by a former federal prosecutor or a habitual criminal. And for some reason, that seems to be a hard choice for some people. That makes me very worried about the future of my country.
Okay, so we have a large market audience here, so what does that mean for the dollar?
Excuse me, what?
What does that mean for the dollar? You were chief economist of the World Bank. You are an economist.
Oh, I'll tell you, when I was at the World Bank, I didn't ever try to weigh in on forecasts about the dollar or forecasts about GDP, but I did try to weigh in on one thing. If you look on Wikipedia at the article about Aadhaar, within the first paragraph, there's a quote from me as the chief economist saying, Aadhaar is the most important technological system in the world right now. And so that's the kind of thing where I feel like I can make a better judgment. And I saw right from the beginning how powerful Aadhaar was going to be. What happens to the dollar? What happens to the stock market? I'm not the right person to ask about that.
So, forecast for us then the US election. And I'll tell you why you're qualified. You are an intelligent man, very intelligent. You come from a political family. Your father was governor of Colorado.
Yep.
Your brother was state senator. Yep. So you obviously have your finger on that pulse. So who's winning?
I think it's very hard to tell right now who will win. It seems to be very close. And the real question is, why is it so hard? And I think to kind of give some credit for this, think about the fact that people are dying younger in the United States. There's some of this is what they call these the diseases of despair, alcoholism, drug addiction. But this is a sign of really profound distress in large parts of the country. And we shouldn't minimize that. And when people are so discouraged, so depressed, that they're drinking themselves to death and they've given up hope, it's not a surprise that they're willing to just lash out or do something a little bit irrational. I think people like me, economists, need to take responsibility for the fact that we let this situation deteriorate to the point where those people are so, they don't see any improvement in their lives. They don't see any future. They don't see the possibility of progress. We should have insisted more firmly that growth had to generate benefits that were shared by everyone. We should have developed programs like Aadhaar that did spread the benefits so widely. And we failed to do so, and now we're paying the price.
Okay, on that note, Professor Romo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.